Well, we are in the final part of this series, 800-pound gorilla, and well, across this entire series, we've had this conversation focused on, well, the gorilla. I mean, the gorilla wreaks havoc in our lives, doesn't it? It makes a mess. I mean, chaos ensues when the gorilla just runs rampant. And so over the course of the past few weeks, we've just been talking about not how to get rid of the gorilla, because you can't get rid of the gorilla. I mean, it's going to, on this side of heaven, that gorilla is going to remain in our lives. But you, me, what we can do is, well, minimize the impact, the effect that the gorilla has on our lives. And so that's why, well, that's been the power of this series is, well, to provide some tools, some help on how to, well, keep the gorilla in its rightful place. So across this series, we've been, well, following along with a storyline of a guy, a person, a human being like you, like me. His name's Elijah. And Elijah comes to, well, a very, very difficult place, a very, well, dark space. I mean, when we started looking at Elijah's story, it was a pinnacle moment. It was a mountaintop moment. I mean, Elijah saw God work in such an amazing, powerful way. In fact, he saw fire rain down from heaven. He saw rain enter in the land after it hadn't rained in 3 years. And oh, by the way, God's power came upon Elijah himself personally. He ran all the way to Jezreel, running faster than, well, King Ahab, who was riding, well, what kings ride. But quickly after that point, darkness entered into Elijah's life. And last week, in part 4, we ended with the part of Elijah's story where God gave Elijah a job to do. Now, you could use a different phrase than God gave him a job to do. You could use some spiritual language like God sent him on a mission. Or you could use a phrase like he had a divine pathway that God laid out in front of him. Or God commissioned him to do something great. Again, you could use different words, different phrasing, over spiritualize it. But remember, Elijah's in a dark space, in a difficult place. Elijah had kind of relegated his calling to his job description, to go where God called him to go and to say what God had told him to say. And in fact, Elijah was done with that job. He was ready to tap out. He was ready to throw in the proverbial towel. He was just ready to be done. But God said, I'm not done with you. Elijah, you might be done, but I am not done with you. I have another job for you to do. The job had 3 very specific aspects to it. And the international one where God asked Elijah to go anoint Hazael as the next king. There's a regional aspect to that job was to, well, anoint a new king, King Jehu, to lead the northern kingdom. The Bible calls that northern kingdom Israel. And it was to, well, remove King Ahab and his evil wife Jezebel, who caused Elijah to run. At least Elijah blamed her. To name a new king. And then, oh, by the way, God said, Elijah, I know that you think that you're the, well, only prophet left, but you're not. And God said, hey, Elijah, go get Elisha. He's going to be another prophet. So that's where we left off in part 4. And, well, how did Elijah respond to God saying, I'm not done with you? How did Elijah respond to God saying, hey, I got something I'm needing you to do? How did Elijah respond after, well, not just once, at least twice that we know of, Elijah saying to God, hey, God, I'm done. I want to tap out. I'm the only one left. They're coming after me. I just want no more. How does Elijah respond? We're told that he went. Now we got to pause there. We have to pause there. Now, this isn't in the text, but we have to ask a series of questions. Now, I think these are the questions that we have to ask. Again, not in the text, and I'm pretty sure, I'm confident I know the answers to these questions that we must ask. And I'm pretty sure you would agree with me. Did Elijah feel like it? I mean, he went, but do you think he felt like going? I think that the answer is a simple no. He didn't feel like it. Again, he had just said to God, hey, God, I'm done. I don't want anything to do with this. I'm tired. They're coming after me. I'm the only one. All of Israel. I mean, he was ruminating. He was just in a dark, dark space. Now, I didn't think he felt like it at all, which leads to the next question. Do you think did he want to? When God said, hey, I have 3 very specific things I'm asking you to do. Go. Do you think he was like, yay, God picked me? I think that answer is no. He didn't want to. He wanted to curl up in a little ball and just sleep his life away. And all that leads to this question. Was Elijah ready? Was he ready to go on this new mission with God, this new divine appointment, this job? Do you think he was just ready? No. You see, we got to pause there because I don't know for you, but I know for me, there's been so many moments in my spiritual journey where I sense, I feel, I know God is saying go, and I start saying things like, I'm not ready. I just don't want to. I don't feel like it. But you see, there's a reason why we call it the spiritual journey. It's why the words in the Psalms that even though I walk through the darkest of valleys, that God is with us. See, God didn't ask Elijah, do you feel like it? God didn't ask Elijah, do you want to? God didn't even ask him, are you ready? And that's what I've experienced in my life. God says, go, and I'll be with you. God says, go, and I'll walk with you. God says, go, and I will lead you. God says, go, and I will provide for you. God says, go, and I'll be your strength. God says, go, and I'll be your courage. God says, go, and I'll be your peace. God says, go, and I'm right with you. And Elijah, he goes. He went. And we're told that he went from there and found Elisha. Found him. He had looked for him, wasn't sure where he was. But he found him. You see, for you and me, we have to understand that the path of healing is often in the going. We see this through story after story after story that we read in our Bibles. I see that in people's lives all the time. That the path of healing is so often connected to the going. To saying, God, I'm just going to follow you. And along the journey, along the way, I just know you're going to help heal what is broken. You're going to help start to put together the pieces that are fractured. You're just going to help breathe life into me because right now I am just empty. And so many times it's so easy to want to push pause and say, well, I'm not ready. Push pause and say, I don't feel like it. Push pause and say, I don't want to. And God's like, hey, you just got to get moving. Again, that's why what the psalmist says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. You're there to guide me. You're there to comfort me. So as I walk through the darkest of spaces, trust that God is with you. And along that journey, watch how God heals you. So Elijah's going. He's going. He's being faithful, even though, again, I don't think he wants to, feels like it, or is even ready. But he is going. And we're told that, well, Elisha was plowing with 12 yoke and oxen, and while he himself was driving the 12 pair. I mean, this is a great insight of Elisha's physical strength. I mean, he was driving a pair by himself, and we're told that Elijah went up to Elisha and threw his cloak around him. This was a symbol of transferring kind of the prophet's power and influence and leadership from one to another. So this was a massive symbol. And oh, by the way, Elisha would have heard all these stories about Elijah. He knew exactly who this person was who walked up beside him, threw his cloak on him. He knew exactly what he had done. He knew the stories about Queen Jezebel. He knew the stories about the prophets of Baal and Asherah. He knew the stories of him leaving his servant, his assistant in Bethel, and just going off and wandering by himself. Those stories had circulated everywhere. And all of a sudden, Elijah shows up and takes his cloak and puts it on Elisha. And Elisha knew exactly what was happening. But he had to run. Did you catch that? He had to run after Elijah. Again, there's spaces in the storyline that I just have to call out. There's spaces in the storyline that we're just not sure what happened in the spaces. Like here, did Elijah say anything to him? Or did he literally just walk up beside him, take his cloak, throw it on him, and kept walking? I think that's what happened. I think there was zero dialogue. Not just like the story's missing the dialogue. I just think there was no dialogue. I think Elijah, again, is still in a very dark space, difficult place. He's just there. He's doing a job because God had called him to do it, but that's all he has in him. So he tosses his cloak on Elisha, and he keeps on walking. No words exchanged. So Elisha has to walk up to him. It's like, hey, we should have a conversation. So he runs up to him. And Elisha says, let me kiss my father and mother goodbye. He's like, hey, can I at least go tell my family that I'm going to leave? I'm going to disappear. He goes, and then I will come with you. Is that okay? And Elijah looks at him and goes, go back. And then he goes, what have I done to you? Now, there's two different aspects that I think we have to focus on Elijah's, what have I done to you? Now, this was kind of a common phrase that just said, well, this is not me. I haven't done anything to you. It was Elijah saying to Elisha, hey, I have no part of this. This is God, and God has assigned me to be his messenger to tell you, hey, you're going to be a prophet. So that's one aspect. But I think there's a flip side to this coin. Yes, it was Elijah saying to Elisha, hey, this is not my decision, not my choice. I'm just doing what God has called me to do. The flip side, I think, is, well, Elijah is saying to Elisha, this is all God, it's not me. So don't ask me my opinion. Don't ask me for insight, because I probably will encourage you not to. But this is God. And Elisha, you got to face God and make a decision for your life. So what does Elisha do? We're told that he took his yoke and oxen and slaughtered them. It was a sign of him 110% committing to follow God in this, divine appointment or job. He killed his oxen. He burned the plowing equipment, took the meat, and gave it to the people, and they ate. He was all in. He's like, okay, God, my entire business, my entire livelihood, everything I have, it's now gone. I'm now available to follow you, to do whatever you ask me to do. Then he set out to follow Elijah. Now, this is a classic kind of line that means that he is going to learn from Elijah. It's a picture of Elijah discipling, spiritually teaching, spiritually leading, spiritually pouring into Elisha. Again, did Elijah feel like it? No, I don't think so. Did he have much to give? I don't think so. Was he ready? I don't think so. But remember that healing is often in the going, in the doing, and trusting that God's going to be enough. And so Elijah poured his life into Elisha's life. And we're told that Elisha became his servant. It was almost as if God was just whispering to Elijah, hey, Elijah, remember when you isolated? Remember when you dismissed your servant, your assistant? You can't journey life alone. I'm providing you someone else to walk with you, to be with you, to encourage you, to be strength when you need strength, to be present when you need someone present. It was God saying to Elijah, hey, Elijah, you weren't designed to be in this life alone. And you need to understand that you weren't designed by God, Creator God, to navigate this place of life alone. Now, as we bring this series to, a close, there's some takeaways that I want to make sure we don't miss. Some takeaways, some insights that I want to make sure we all hold on to. And, all of these, except for the first one, are action items. All of these are, what we can do. The first one is just, we got to recognize, we got to remember, we got to make sure we don't lose sight of. And simply, that one is the amygdala hijack. You see, in part one of this series, we started off talking about, our brains, the entire limbic system, and how whether or not we see a threat, which is the classic definition of a fear. When you see a threat, see a snake, a bear, a spider, whatever it is, a clown, right? When you see a threat, right, that's fear. But anxiety is when we think that there is a threat, whether we see it or we think there is. Our amygdala, this little almond-shaped small part of our brain, kicks our entire body into the fight or flight response. And so don't forget, when your heart's racing, when your palms are sweaty, when you feel like your entire body is out of control, you got to call it out. Because your amygdala wants to hijack your entire body. In fact, it will shut down your frontal cortex where all of your reasoning is happening. So just recognize, again, it's a powerful part of how God created us. When we see a threat, it's powerful. And even there's healthy components to anxiety when we think there's a threat. There's some healthy components. But when our amygdala hijacks our entire being, it wreaks havoc. Remember, don't forget it. Because when you realize what's happening to yourself physically, it'll help you move through, the rest of these takeaways. Because the next one, you got to calibrate. What do you have to calibrate? This is what God did so specifically with Elijah. You got to calibrate the cycle. This is what happens when our amygdala hijacks our entire body. When we go into the fight or flight response, we want to run, we want to escape. The question is, what's your go-to escape mechanism? You have one, I have one, or two, or five. Do you recognize when you're escaping, what that looks like? And some of our escapisms are more dangerous than others. But you should know them because it will help you bring to light what's going on within you. And when we escape, we isolate. And we either isolate physically, we shove people away, or we isolate mentally by saying things like, I don't want to bother you. Or like, nobody cares. Or, I got to figure this out on my own. How are you isolating? And that leads to ruminating. So those conversations we have over and over and over again, the negative conversations that we have within ourselves, where we just know what other people think, but in our reality, we're making up the storyline in our own minds. It's the lowercase t truths that we've convinced ourselves, like Elijah did, convinced himself. He was the only prophet left, and God's like, you're wrong. Elijah convinced himself that all the Israelites had turned away from God. And God's like, no, you're wrong. What are those lowercase t truths that you've convinced yourself? See, that's what ruminating leads to. And so God was so intentional to calibrate Elijah. And how did he start? He started with his physical health. I want to encourage you, pay attention to your physical health. Exercise. What you eat, what you drink or don't drink. Start with your physical health, and it's going to help on your journey to become emotionally and mentally healthier. What do you need to calibrate? Which all that leads to? Carry a load. Carry a load. I just shared with you that the path to healing is often in the going. And you can change that going to the carrying, being. There's different words that can go there. It's the same thing. It's in the active movement of. We leaned into some of Paul's wisdom, the Apostle Paul, where he said, hey, we should carry each other's burdens. Or that word means when the load is too heavy to carry. And the question is, well, what do you need to carry? In your path of healing, God's saying, hey, go. There's other people that I'm going to intersect with your life, whether you want to or not, whether you feel like it or not, whether you're ready for it or not. Remember, hey, the path of healing is often in the going. And God's like, hey, there's other people that you need to help, even if you don't feel, even if you're not ready, even if you don't want to. But Paul also went on to say, hey, there's a load that only you can carry. What load have you been trying to put off of your shoulders onto someone else's when it's really yours to carry? You see, this obliterates marriages, friendships, employee-boss relationships, church relationships. When all of a sudden, when you start shoving your load onto someone else's shoulders, when you should be carrying that part of the load yourself. So what load do you need to carry in other people's lives? But what load do you need to bring back and put back onto your shoulders? What do you need to do? And that leads to this. Got to take captive. Take captive. All the researchers have said this is the triangle, the CBT triangle, that our thoughts influence our emotions, which influence our behaviors. That's all the research. It all starts with our thoughts. Our thoughts impact everything. You read the research, that's what they tell you. But guess what? The Bible tells us the same thing over and over again. You know what the Bible talks about? Our minds, our thoughts. And this is why these words have shown up over and over again in this entire series, that we are to take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Every thought, take captive. Why? Because your thoughts influence your emotions, which influence your behaviors, what you do. It starts in your mind. So take captive every thought. Make it obedient to Christ. And then this all leads to this. We got to practice. I love when the Apostle Paul said, hey, here's a list of things for you to think about. Whatever's true and noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, and praiseworthy. What a list. We looked at this entire list. He said, hey, these things, think about these things. Then he goes on and says, oh, by the way, I have lived this out. I have modeled this. In perfection, no. In pursuit, absolutely. And then Paul goes, hey, I've been trying to do this in my own life, and you need to practice. This isn't natural. Why? Because the 800-pound gorilla wants to wreak havoc in your life. Remember, we can't get rid of it, but we can minimize it by taking every thought captive, every thought, and make it obedient to Jesus. And we have to practice it over and over and over again. And all of this comes down to this one last takeaway. You know what that is? You. No one can do this except for you. Now, what I'm not saying is go at it alone. You've missed this series. The point of this series, if you've heard that, right? We're to carry each other's burdens. But you have to want help. You have to be open for other people to help you. That's why every week we've talked about the resources available for you, to encourage you, to bring other people in, to provide help. But you got to remember, and this is just true, that you follow you wherever you go. If you look around and you have a bunch of complainers surrounding you, guess who might be a complainer? You. If you have a bunch of negative people around you, guess who might just be negative? You. If you have a bunch of people that just gossip and tear people down, I mean, that's everyone who surrounds you, guess who might be? You got to realize you are the common denominator in your life. And you can't change other people. But what you can do is focus on you. And that's why God took Elijah on this 40-day journey in the wilderness. It's why God didn't show up in the fire or the wind or the earthquake, but in the gentle whisper. And God will quietly wait until you quiet yourself. Our purpose, our goal of this entire series was to breathe hope and provide help for you. And hopefully, it's done both of those things. There is hope. Even in dark places, dark spaces, there's hope. And there's things you can do as you navigate through a difficult season. What I'm really excited about is as this series comes to a close, we're launching a new series titled Kickstart. And it's kind of like part 2 of 800-pound gorilla. Remember, we want to breathe hope and provide help, to you, for you. And so Kickstart's all about how do we kickstart every day? You see, researchers, again, have told us that your first 5 minutes, your first 10 minutes of the day are the most important days. In fact, researchers have said if you focus those first few minutes of every day, focus on the things that you are grateful for, it will change not just the course of that day, but the future days. If every day you wake up and focus on gratitude, and that starts in your mind, it will start to change the course of your life. But guess what? Not only do researchers tell us that, the Bible over and over and over again tells us that as well. And so we'll kickstart a new series titled Kickstart, helping us fuel our day with gratitude. You see, so many times we wait for the first of the year for a new you. But we're going to do that now. We're getting ready for 2023. And we can start right now to take everything we've learned, all of those takeaways from 800-pound gorilla, and amp it one more step. So join us as we learn how to kickstart every day, as we learn together how to fuel our day with gratitude. Let me pray. Lord, I thank you. for being so patient with us and so present, so persistent. Thank you. For a story like Elijah, a raw, authentic story that so many of us can connect with, and to watch you never give up on him, always being present. Love you. Thank you for walking with us through the great seasons of life and the difficult ones. Thank you for being present. Thank you for your love. In your name I pray. Amen.